our conversation we're having is like what Jacob is a representation of, is like we are talking about breaking the boxes, not listening to what mainstream says. If we listen to what mainstream says right now, it's personal development, right? It's go to a Tony Robbins, go to a retreat, go all these different things. But we're talking about a different way that isn't widely celebrated or seen as success. Welcome back to Right-Minded Conversations. I'm Ashley. This is Big Miracle Energy, and these are Right-Minded Conversations. Essentially, they were spirit-led connections where I was like, hey, let's have a spirit-led conversation and hit record. So that is exactly what you are getting. And here is today's Right-Minded Conversation. First of all, thank you so much for joining me and coming here today. And I'm just so excited. I loved everything about what you shared on YouTube of like how you found your way to Jacob and how you had found him before, but he didn't resonate at that time. And then now how he resonates. And then, we'll just have a conversation. So, yeah.
While I was growing up in Ukraine, I'm from more or less musical family. My mom was a music teacher, basically choir.
Okay.
She tried to get me into music early, like from the age of 5, 6. It did not work. It was a daily struggle. I was not getting into it and just like practicing being 7, and which is ironically similar to what Jacob went through. So I just quit like study of music around 8 probably, and just I was left alone, and I got into it by myself because we were a musical family. All our friends were musicians. So there was a lot of music and a lot of good music in the house, which was rare in Ukraine, because you could not go and buy good records. There was no radio. It was just like where it was approved by the state. But we had good music. We had jazz. We had like music like Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind and Fire, which was kind of like unusual for those places. So that's what I kind of grew up on. And I got into music by myself. I decided when I was a teenager to go back to music school. I finished like a 5-year course in a couple of years on the wind section instruments, and I got into music college. And I studied in music in college for 2 years, but then the Soviet Union was falling apart, so we left for Israel, basically as refugees. And it was always like connected to music, always was a big hobby, and finding, again, very weirdly same artists that like Jacob's family was growing up on. Found like Frank Zappa was a big, obsession, and then found musicians like Steve Vai, and that was one of the people that was recommending Jacob for the longest term. Herbie Hancock, Quincy Jones, Take Six. I discovered Take Six almost by a referral, and it just blew my mind when it came out like in the 90s. So yeah, that's my background, and that's why just listening to music and always, especially these years, it's so much easier with streaming, right? So I use Apple Music, and it recommends things. There's an algorithm. Okay, listen to this, try this stuff. So between this and recommendations from Steve Vai, Jacob Collier started popping up, pops up here and there. But when you're busy, when you try like certain music, you can just like turn it on and okay, it's catchy, it's funky. Yeah, I like it. I can drive to this. This music was different, right? So like first impressions was like it's just weird and something is off. Like somehow there was the expression that maybe just the interaction with the crowd was the crowd was just too adoring. And it's like, okay, that's too much like a cult, right? So it didn't work until, like I said in the email, it was a psychedelic experience, and I decided to try it on, and it clicked so well that literally been obsessed since then. And it was about 3 years ago. And on the side, kind of like parallel, right? But not if we're not talking about music. for the last 10 years, getting into things like starting from self-improvement,
Mm-hmm.
because I was working in sales, right? So from looking for things to help with sales, getting into self-improvement like Tony Robbins, and
Mm.
getting into things like Ram Dass,
Mm-hmm.
especially with psychedelic experiences. And somehow it all connected at one place, right? I
Mm.
guess that answers your question. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, that's very beautiful. Um, it's like it's like your musical background isn't necessarily what drew you to Jacob. Like some people it is like their musical background. And yes, you had this beautiful musical background, so it feels like, well, that must be what drove you to Jacob, right? But at first when you heard it, like you were still like constricted. It was like, this is weird. This like, no, this doesn't check any of the boxes for me, right? Like I can't drive to it. I can't sit and hang out with it. Like you couldn't find where it belonged. Am I hearing that right? Is that what you're kind of saying when you
Yeah,
first heard
yeah,
it?
yeah, that's exactly right. Because like, like his voice, it's not a traditional pop or jazz or whatever voice, right? You cannot really put it like, okay, I get this is what pop's supposed to sound like. He sounds different, right? So yeah, it wasn't working out until you're in the right state, or maybe it's something more than that. Maybe it's just everything has to come to the right state, right? And then it's all about this second. So
Yeah.
if it's not the right time, then it's not going to work out.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. I love like you had gotten into like Tony Robbins and started to go down that path, which was like expansive for you, obviously, because all of a sudden a psychedelic trip comes in somewhere. Like you have to have some sort of expansion to step into that. So like Tony Robbins, he was like the forefront of personal development and expand your mind. And you have this power. I mean, isn't his first thing called like unleash the power within? It's like literally about your power, and you walk
Yeah.
on coals and you're there till like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And he's just like, what I've heard, at least I've never witnessed one. He's like a robot on stage because he just keeps going and doesn't stop. And he has like endless amounts of energy. So you get into that, and then how does that even lead to a psychedelic trip? Because I think even people listening here, like I get it, but some people don't quite understand still, even down the personal development realm, how someone can potentially feel called to something like that. Not everybody is, right? So obviously you felt some sort of pull within. I mean, do you feel comfortable talking about that experience at all?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right about Tony Robbins. I got into it probably around like 2017, and I went to that seminar, and it was an amazing experience. And then I volunteered and went again as a volunteer. And I was actually scheduled to go again in 2019, and that got canceled because of that's the COVID hit, right?
Yeah.
It was March 2019. And something happened is that, well, first, Tony Robbins, as great as he is, and as much as it works, and it helped me a lot, it's a very commercial enterprise, right? And it's also very much built on achievement and
Mm-hmm.
productivity and
Success.
wealth. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
success, as far as who who defines that success, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as great as it is, like you look at this event, maybe like with a little bit open eyes or clear eyes or whatever, and you see that it's designed, yeah, it's designed to help you, but also designed as a to get more money out of you.
Mm-hmm.
Like that seminar, the first seminar is not expensive, like $600
No, but it goes.
for 3 days. Right. So they get you in the second day, they get you on such an emotional high, you're in such an ecstasy, and it's really well made, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
works.
Yeah.
And then once you're in this peak of that experience, what do? Sales pitch for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Literally 3 hours, they sell you on more stuff, and people sign up. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like top package and $90,000. So you look at this and you start thinking, well, what does this mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then during COVID, I couldn't go anywhere, and like things pop up on YouTube, pop up here and there. That's where Ram Dass came in.
Mm.
I read the book. I
Which
listened to
book? Wait,
him.
which book? Be Here Now?
Be Here Now is the first one. Yep, that's definitely the first one. And then I read all the rest. There's like three
Ah,
books after
mhm.
that. But really, the best thing is the podcast, right? His podcast
Yes.
all available, going back. There are
Mhm.
years of
In the
lecture.
80s, 70s and 80s, him
Yeah,
speaking.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I listened to all of it, and like I know all his anecdotes. I know all his stories. I use it all the time. And from like getting involved in this part, it kind of like, psychedelics is kind of a part of it, right? Because so many
Mhm.
things point to that. As far as like a lot of different religions, you can see traces of it that come from psychedelics in some
Mhm.
ways, right?
Mhm.
And like the research about Elysium and
Mhm.
research about like Ram Dass talks about Book of the Dead, that
Mhm.
it's an ancient Hindu
Mhm.
book from Tibet. And then he reads it and is like, well, this is exactly the psychedelic experience. This cannot be a coincidence,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, so that lead to that, and
Mhm.
just got into this and had some profound
Mhm.
experiences. Finding Jacob Collier was one of them, and there were a couple
Mhm.
of others that,
Mhm.
um, yeah, that's where we are.
Ah, this is just so beautiful because like we didn't dive deep. I don't know a ton about you before us hitting record. I knew enough that like our paths crossed for a reason. Let's talk deeper. But what you just said is so powerful. Is is like the personal development world period right now. It's literally person development, right? Which is ego development. And you read Ram Dass, and the ego is that fear-based thing that keeps us stuck in the hamster wheel, right? Otherwise, it's the other choice is unconditional love. And yes, I agree with you. Personal development has a space, right? It definitely helped get me to another level. And it sounds like it helped you kind of get to another level that then got you to the level of Ram Dass and other things like that. But I think often people will be sitting in it, spending tons of money, wondering why they still feel so miserable.
Yeah, and it's not just spending money. It's like I really realized like these things deeper. And last year, just going through CBT therapy,
Mm-hmm.
where I stumble upon this thing that in CBT therapy, well, it's redundant, CBT. There's a concept of self-limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And the first self-limiting belief is something like, my worth depends on my achievement.
Yeah.
Or it could be my achievement, my wealth, or my looks, or my
Mm-hmm.
physical ability.
Relationship. Yeah.
Right. So that's self-development, right? And that means it's not even about the money. It's about that, okay, if I'm achieving, I feel
Mm-hmm.
great. It works 100%. But what happens on the day that when I'm not achieving? What
Mm-hmm.
happens if I get sick? What happens if I get depressed?
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, as much as I was high when everything goes great, I'm gonna go down to deepest
Mm-hmm.
depression and everything that comes out of it.
Yeah. I always used to say, because I went on that journey as well, because I was high when I was achieving, like it feels amazing. And you're, like on this cloud until all of a sudden you're not. And that's when you really see, like, oh, this work I've done is just really surface level because it's kind of almost been distracting me. I always call it like the icing on the cake, but you missed building the cake. So it's like eventually going to cave in because there's nothing inside of it. And for me, like I've had multiple moments like that in my life. First was my divorce. I had built like all of my happiness on, having the house and the marriage and the kid and the dog and, the stable career and all of that. And then the second time was building my business and getting really focused on, a lot of those Tony Robbins tactics. I hired a business coach who taught me those that like you have a $9 offer and then you upsell, 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 upsell. Um, and I mean, there's a reason why personal development is a quadrillion. I mean, I don't even know. I'm making up a number business though, right? And there's a reason why, like, there's so many new books coming out all the time because literally it's the same exact concept, which is always like bring awareness, right? Like CBT, bring awareness to what's happening. And then you look at the story that's behind it, and then you choose different and you release the weight and you remember your truth. Like I came up with a acronym of CPR squared. So get curious, shift your perspective, release the weight, and remember your truth, right? Every single personal development book, if you just like look at the bones of it, is that. But then they put like all this fancy, like, let's do this and let's do that. And it's really about that deeper sense of self. And when I say self, for me, I mean capital self, which is the one, which is how we are all one, instead of Ashley as an individual needs to have $1 million in her bank account, needs to weigh 10 pounds and have, Botoxy skin. And that means she's doing well in life, right? Versus like the all self of like showing up. And truly, the Bible says, love thy neighbor as thyself. Like if you look at it in that manner, not about putting the neighbor first, but looking at everybody as you and loving them as you and giving as if it was you, right? Like giving the shirt off your back or whatever it may look like. That's when I feel like you start to build the cake when you really get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what psychedelics teach you. That's what Ram Dass talks about. And he didn't just talk about it. He did this by example, right? Yeah. Because you probably know, like end of his life, he was broke. And like his friends had to take care of him because he had nothing. He gave everything away. And he could have made billions, right? He could have opened a church. He was talented enough.
He didn't want any of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like he was doing seminars for a while, but even this was like, there was no money in it somehow.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, where are you today, I guess? And, I know this conversation is about Jacob as well, but I think I just want to say to anybody watching this is like, our conversation we're having is like what the Jacob is a representation of, is like we are talking about breaking the boxes, not listening to what mainstream says. Like if we listen to what mainstream says right now, it's personal development, right? It's like go to a Tony Robbins, go to a retreat, go, all these different things. But we're talking about a different way that isn't, widely celebrated or seen as success. And I think that's the beauty of why I love Jacob so much, is like Quincy Jones comes knocking on his door and he's like, nah, that's not what I'm doing. Like you just said with Ram Dass, he could be a quadrillionaire. He could have way more money than Tony Robbins and it could still be growing, probably even more after his death. Usually after those people die, it grows even more. But that's not success because he can't take it with him. He knows that has nothing to do with what's here. And I feel like that's Jacob sees something so much greater too.
Yeah. So like to tie it forward to Jacob, right, what it does. And I had a couple of notes taken. So one of the things is that just blows my mind is what it does. And it ties to what we're talking about. His relationship with time. Because time, I know you talked about this, right? I heard you talk about this. Time is an illusion, right? There's nothing other than this minute, this second, right? Exactly. There's nothing else. So the way he understands it, feels it, is on a level that's hard to comprehend. And one of the examples I like to bring is his Tiny Desk at Home concert.
That one that was on, I saw it on YouTube. It's like a series, right? On like NPR maybe or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a series at NPR, and he went there in like 2019 with a small band, and it's beautiful. It's a really nice video. And then COVID hit, and Tiny Desk, they were trying to do the same thing, and they would let people record those concerts at home. Right. And they would just transmit them. So, but this is Jacob, right? He cannot just sit and record. So what he did, he set a camera in his room, the same room where everything happens. he recorded himself 4 times
Oh, yes.
playing to himself.
Yes.
Not only he plays to himself, he talks to himself. He
Mm.
throws jokes back and forth.
Mm.
So the understanding of time and the feeling of time somebody has to have to pull this off
Mm.
is on a level that's just unbelievable,
Mhm.
right? It's not just audio. Oh, I recorded one
No.
audio, then I record another one. It's video. And it
Mm.
looks like there are 4 of them in the room and they talk to each other. And it's
Mhm.
just wild, right?
Mhm.
And like his other stuff, the famous videos of like the Moon River,
Mhm.
and where it's just like how it can handle time and know where everything's going to happen and when it's going to happen, and literally not seeing but feeling the futures, like the future and what's happening right now. It's just so interconnected. That's just blowing my mind, right? And blowing a
Mhm.
lot of people's mind. Or the recent song that again is just blowing up the bridge over troubled
Mhm.
water.
Oh, yes.
Right. So, but that song, there's no rhythm, right? Normally, everything he does, everything musician down with, there's rhythm. One,
Mm.
two, three, four, right? If you do this in the software, then the software there will be click, right?
Mhm.
It clicks on your ear, nobody's gonna hear it, but that's how you keep yourself in rhythm. That song, there's no rhythm. It's
Mm.
just flowing. It's like a painting, and he just
Yeah.
paints
Huh.
with sound, and but he knows where everything's going to happen. He knows where somebody else is going to sing. So of course he
Mm.
can listen to it. So it's not like supernatural, but it's just insane.
Mm. Oh gosh, you got me. That song here in St. Pete, when he played it, he used like his equalizer machine or whatever it's called.
Harmonizer.
Oh, harmonizer, yeah. Oh my, oh my gosh. Like that was, I mean, I think you watched my video, but that was like expansive for me. That like completely opened me up. But I love what you're saying though, because it's so true. He just like takes the rules of the illusion of this world, whatever, what would it be considered? Like Newtonian physics, maybe? Is that, I think that's where like time and stuff falls under. He takes it and he's like, oh, this is cool. All right, let me get to work, and then he just starts whatever it is, whether he's making that video that you're talking about where he's all over the place or he's, collaborating with someone. That's what I love too, like with his collaboration. Um, it's like he can see the beauty in someone else that they can't even see. And through his like musical abilities, he shows them.
Yeah. Yeah. And the people that he finds, like in the recent years, I just realized, okay, if somebody is performing with Jacob or recording with Jacob or talks to Jacob, I should listen to it because there's got to be something, right?
Right.
And like, first of all, it's amazing. Well, not amazing, but not worthy. Sorry, my light is automatic.
No worries.
I'm in the office, so when I don't move, it turns off. So noteworthy is how many women he
Mm,
picks and raises. And his band, it's him, 3 guys, and 3 women,
yeah.
right? That's pretty rare.
Mm,
And he gives them the voice, he lets them do what they do, and they're super talented,
mm,
but they cannot, still in this society, whatever, they cannot get to his level because I mean, being women, it probably is not really helping, right? And then just some of them, I don't know. Have you listened? Have you checked his previous collaborators?
yeah, I mean, I just like listen to the Jacob Collier's
Okay,
Spotify and just listen.
okay. So like examples, one is pretty amazing, and I think you would love just figuring out who she is and listen to her. Emily Elbert,
Emily
and
Albert. You'll have to send me that name and I'll
yeah,
put it in the notes too if anyone's tuning in.
yeah. So she performed with him on the previous tour.
Mm,
Um, and there's a video of their concert in Lisbon, and she is there, and you can listen to her. She's just First of all, she's amazingly talented singer and guitar player. And second, her level of just enlightenment and just like an example, she has a song, Not Alone. She has a few albums. The latest one is just on different level. From her last album, first song, eye to eye and hand to heart to soul. To be alive means never to be alone. We're not alone. We matter reassembled from millions of stars, and through time and space and splendor, arrived at where we are, both complex and simple, the whole and just a part. As we grow, we will remember how we got this far.
Wow.
So that's just one person that he found out of nowhere. She was not famous. She's still not famous. He pulled her out of somewhere, invited, she played with him, and
Wow.
and whoever's with him right now, I mean, you saw them live, right? All three women. They're just
Yeah.
amazing. They're super talented.
Yeah, but I'm just such a firm believer that, you know, when you really are the lighthouse, you like the people, you magnify them in, you attract them in. And I think like us coming together, right? Like somehow you found my YouTube video and decided to write a comment, right? Like, let's be honest, unless you're some superstar and have a massive following and you're hoping that they'll see your comment and respond. A lot of people don't comment on YouTube stuff. It's not super duper common. Like you have to really feel called to do it. So I think like that's what happens with Jacob is like these people come into his awareness and he's so open that he doesn't question it. He allows people to seamlessly float in it. But I think so many people are still really living in that ego world, which is constant defenses, right? Because how is this person going to hurt me or attack me? It's like kill or be killed, right? You're constantly on guard of not knowing what this person can do. And I feel like Jacob is like, I don't know you, but I want to know you. Game on, come into my world, come into my world, come into my world. And that's really, especially like after COVID and the war and everything and politics being where they're at. Like, I feel like today we're more guarded than we've ever been against our neighbor, against the coffee shop person, against the grocery clerk. And I feel like Jacob is just like open.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I learned from him, especially listening to interviews. And he mentioned it a few times, so it's a big thing for him. And he uses the word permission. This is what that audience choir. That's
Oh, jeez.
give people permission to express themselves. That's all he does, right?
Yes.
Just go ahead and sing, go ahead and dance, go ahead, do whatever you want, right? When he collaborates with people, he talks about that too. Like he will have an idea, but if that person, and he will bring people that don't speak English, right? African performance,
Yes.
Indian, Moroccans, and
Anything.
yeah, and they don't understand what he wants. And it's like, all right, just do something. Just do
Yeah.
something. They do it. He works around it, weaves it into his something, and puts it out.
Yeah. And so this is kind of like a random side note that just popped in my mind. So I had a conversation with another gentleman who commented on my YouTube. And he said, because you saw the San Francisco concert, right?
Yeah.
He thought it was maybe the San Francisco concert that right before that, a fan gave him like a 10-string guitar or something. And he played it. It might have been the concert after the San Francisco then, but he had never played a 10-string guitar before. And whichever concert, either the San Francisco or the one right after, he like
It
did a
was
whole,
before that. It was a
oh,
couple of
before.
concerts before. Yeah.
And he
Like San
played it
Diego,
like he'd
maybe. Yeah.
been playing it forever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's insane. It's insane what he can do. You give him an instrument and he figures it out in a second. But
But it's also like, you know, you've read a lot of Ram Dass, so he talks a lot about like when spirit's coming through, it's like limitless possibilities, and it also allows like all past experiences, multiple lifetimes to like come through, and your gifts and, you know, the things you've learned. And I feel like that's what Jacob is. He's just like this open vessel of like everything. So it's not about him learning. He truly is at that stage of like remembering, right? So he gets it, he tinks around for a little bit, but he allows spirit to come through so seamlessly that just is like a download. It's like when you're downloading new software, he just takes him maybe a second or two, but it's like, boom, there.
Yeah. Oh, that's like a whole other thing that's not being talked almost at all, which is kind of like weird. It's like on the side, and to me, it feels like everybody sees that, but nobody talks about this. But it's like neurodivergency, because like I'm definitely, I found out recently, felt that I'm neurodivergent on ASD, whatever. And like just seeing and hearing his lyrics, he's neurodivergent. He's on some kind of like autism level, and that's part of it. But also like a lot of people that are like prophets, deeply religious people, that's also part of that, right? This just different way of understanding the world, different way of
Yeah.
thinking, different way of relating to people, just being different, but also obviously like that's why it's called spectrum, right? Because it could be all kind of other things. But like one of the things Jacob said in one of his interviews about his childhood, that he could just sit in a room on a chair and just go like this, and in his head there's so much stuff going on and so many interesting things. He doesn't need anything else. He can sit like this for 3 hours and just having the blast, right?
Yeah.
Which is great for him. But this is like, 50 years ago, people would be sent to asylum for this.
Yes.
Today we
Right.
realize this is just neurodivergency.
But so I honor this new diagnosis of neurodivergency, but I also question it, and not question the fact that it's not real, but I question the fact that what if that is the norm that it's meant to be, right? But because if we look back to all the thought leaders, all the people that really made a massive impact in the world in any area, it could be art, it could be science, it could be anything. Today, if we took the DSM out and looked at their lives, they would all be like mentally insane or bipolar or neurodivergent or schizophrenic or, these massive mood disorders that say that they're not right. But what if in fact they've always had it right? The neurodivergent have always had it right. It's been like society, right? The chasing of money, the chasing of all these external things. Because to me, like what neurodivergency is accumulation of all of the mental health diagnoses that have to do really with behavior. So it has to really do with how you view the world and how you process the world within. And it's more of an internal processing than what most people expect you to do externally, right? Like respond in a certain manner or interact with this cup in a certain manner, or stay time like time is one of the biggest things that they use to see if you have any of these diagnoses, is how do you interact with time,
Yeah,
right? So
100%.
to me,
Yeah.
it's like I caution individuals that like I know sometimes it gives people the answers they're seeking, but also to remember that what if actually this is like getting the ultimate award? What if instead of it being like a diagnosis that makes you different, it's a diagnosis that makes you the lighthouse, right? The one that actually has remembered more than even like, the people running the world.
Yeah. And so one of the Hans Christian Andersen, the writer, wrote like all those children tales, like The
Which book?
Mermaid,
Yes, yes, yes.
Mermaid,
Yep. Okay.
those,
I
right?
was like, I know that name.
Yeah. So not like the Disney version, right? But the real, the
The
gritty
real one.
versions, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So people that are, doctors that understand this, they say that he was definitely neurodivergent, probably autistic. A lot of his books, those stories, if you read into them and just really analyze it, even on the most basic level, it's exactly what it is. And that's what you're saying about. So take the Naked King story,
Mm-hmm.
where the king gets this new fashionable designer that
Mhm.
says, I'm going to give you this super fancy outfit, the best, the most fashionable thing. And he does the thing, and there's nothing, right? But it's like this ritual. So he's the designer. If he says it's something that everybody says it is something, the king goes outside and everybody says, oh, it's such a wonderful outfit. This is the best ever. And there's
Mhm.
one kid, 10-year-old kid,
He's
that's
like,
coded as autistic. And it looks at
mhm.
like, what do you guys, are you all crazy? He's naked,
Mhm.
right? So that's what, isn't that what Jacob is doing? Just looking at everything and like, this is all nonsense. We just
Yeah.
enjoy ourselves and sing
Mhm.
and get this experience just from what these sounds make to our do to our brain and how they
Mhm.
change us. And
Yeah.
that's all happens in the moment, and nothing else
Mhm.
matters.
Yeah. Yeah, because like it, you know, I mean, there's just so many things if we went down the rabbit hole of time in the present moment, right? If we really lived in the present moment, we couldn't even have diagnoses like neurodivergent or anything because the only way to have that is to compare and to judge, and the only ability to compare and judge is to live on a timeline instead of living in the here and now, right? So
Yeah.
in the here and now, everybody's just fine. Everybody just is, right? Because there's no comparison. So I just like, but it's so easy to pull us back into the time continuum because everything's created for that, right? Like that continuum of like time and, the like the king wearing clothes and, because we usually are all naked at some point in the day, right? Like you get in the shower. So you obviously, when you put on your clothes, had to think, oh, because I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, or, or I'm cold or whatever. You were comparing it to something,
Yeah.
which means time exists, which means because then you'd have to have memories or thoughts of memories to compare it. And
And judging, is it good or
yeah,
is it bad, right? Everything's got to be either good or bad, or
right. Which
judging
that
all the
doesn't even
time.
exist.
Yeah. And judging people, right?
Mhm.
Oh, is it a threat, or is it a possible mate, or is that just
Right.
something else, right? So every time we look at somebody, it's like, do I have to compete with you, or do I have to fight you,
Yeah.
or do I have
Or
to
mate
run
with
after
you.
you, or mate with you? Yeah.
Yeah. But Jacob, it just like, and you feel that like in his concerts or concert, I've been to one. Like I act like, oh, I've been to one. He's only been in my atmosphere for like a month and a half, but it's rocked my world. But um, we have been around some very present people, some people that are, I would say, like David Hoffmeister. He's very close to Ram, or was close to Ram Dass. He's a thought leader when it comes to A Course in Miracles, and I would say is what you would consider enlightened. And he's very present. But Jacob's presence felt different in the manner of it was just natural. Like I feel like he just like didn't need to do any of the forgetting or the shedding that a lot of us need to do that you've done and I've done, and psychedelics can help with that, or listening to Ram Dass and his beautiful stories, or just being really intentional about shedding those layers. But it was just like here he was. And when you hear him talk about his mom, he says she was like so open. And he meant like her mind was open. I can't remember the exact words he described it one time. And I was like,
Yeah. So yeah,
ah,
it's what you described is like one word is childlike, right? Is this
mm-hmm.
childlike?
Wonder.
Oh, you're a person, you're a friend, right?
Mm,
Children, like my daughter when she was 5, everybody was a friend. She would go to strangers and chat with them, right? And it's
mm-hmm.
totally normal. She doesn't do that anymore. And Jacob, between being this way and his mom, who's just like a saint
Mm,
and really also like connected, enlightened person, obviously, like she's a Reiki practitioner and all of that.
mm,
So it starts making sense that she's like,
mm.
you do whatever you
Yeah.
need to do and support him in whatever way she could,
Mm,
and just let him grow. And he
yeah.
grew, but he kept this, right? And going back to psychedelics, like people like scientists that research psychedelics, they say that some of them say that psychedelics let you get back to that state, like a childlike state, when you, like a state of wonder, when you look at a tree and you're just like, this is the most beautiful tree ever, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a color and it moves and it makes a sound and it's so amazing, right? But it's always amazing.
Yeah.
Like, even if you're 50, it should be amazing, but it's not. We just move through the world thinking about mortgages
Yeah.
and just forget all of that. But
Mortgages.
psychedelics, well, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
But when you get to the state, you can listen to music that way, or you can just go outside and look at a flower and just stare at it and be like, yeah, this is so cool. This is just beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's been such a journey for me, of unwinding, and, psychedelics at one point was a part of my journey. And I even, began dabbling and leading others on journeys until I got to this place of, I realized I can live as if I'm on psychedelics every single day. And it's just the shedding of the layers. So I think psychedelics, if people feel called to it, it's such a beautiful looking glass into what is potential, like what
Yeah.
you can experience every single day. And I think for me, I'm often careful, and I talked about that in my video, to not place Jacob on a pedestal, because in fact, like, I truly believe what Jacob is representing is very close to what we truly all are, which is that unconditional love. And there's been moments in a couple interviews where Jacob, I can feel his attack come in, and you definitely can feel some pain there, which makes sense because he wouldn't be here if he didn't have some sort of forgiveness lesson. So he definitely has, but he seems to be the closest. But like he even says with the title genius, he was being, I think, interviewed by Colin and Samir, and he says, people call him a genius, and what they've immediately done is placed him in this box of, I can't relate to you. And
Yeah.
that's so not true.
Yeah. And like his lyrics, it says often that, like, oh, like these lyrics, he writes them so they could be interpreted in any way you
Yes. I
want,
read
right?
that somewhere the other day. Yeah.
Yeah, but that being said, sometimes things pop up. So, like one of his songs, this is from his first album, and it's called Savior, right? I mean, how on the nose is that? So, the lyrics, and it goes back and forth, right? So it starts, you say that I'm lost and you can help me find, but I don't want to be a savior. I wish you could tell me something to change my mind, but you don't want to be my savior. So the whole song is revolves about savior, and it's both, I don't want to be a savior and you're not going to be my savior. So yeah, it's like such a, it could mean anything, but also there's got to be something in this, right? And this is his first album that he did in his room by himself.
Yeah.
And like a lot of this album, it's beautiful, but a lot of this, you can, especially in this song, it's like there's a little bit of angst going on and a little bit like, I have to prove something. And like that what you were talking about, that's when Quincy
Yeah.
told him, let's sign
Well,
on my label. And he said, no, I'm gonna make this.
yeah. Well, no, not that. What he's talking about, this guy that talks about creativity and says you must create for yourself, not the audience.
Yeah.
And Jacob gets really upset about this guy and is like, I'll have a conversation with him, which I'm not saying the guy is right, but the way all of a sudden Jacob shows up is completely out of character. And it kind of reminds me of a moment in my life where, like, I hired those business coaches and they taught me how to sell people and just like did some things really against my soul. And Jacob says, I did that and it didn't work. So you can tell that, like, there is some pain there, some opportunity for him to forgive and to release that weight. Otherwise he wouldn't invite, like, so strong, so much emotion about, I'll have a conversation with him. Like, he's not for creative people. Like, he wouldn't care, because Jacob, you can tell, is just one of those people that's like, you do you, I'll do me. And people try to box him into being a person that makes plans and stuff and goals and dreams all the time. And he does a beautiful, eloquent job of honoring them, but also making it very clear, I don't do that. I live in the moment. Like if I were to make a plan or have a vision of the future, then I couldn't allow what's in me to come forward, right? Like he's always like, I can't wait to see what Jacob's going to look like tomorrow either, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So that's really the moment I was referring to. But I think, you know, with the music piece, I love that you said at first, you were like, what is this crap? Kind of. I mean, those weren't the words you said, but that's what I said in my head at first, was kind of like, what is this crap?
Yeah.
And I was definitely listening to it through a place of the ego in that moment. And quickly I shifted to a place of like love and what I would say Holy Spirit. You know, what I represent is my guide. And then I got it. I was like, oh, it has nothing to do with the music per se, and everything to do with like what I'm receiving, you know, like what's actually, you know, it's not, do you know what I mean? It's not like what I'm like tangibly hearing right here, like, oh, the melodies and the notes per se. For me, it's like what's deeply moving me inside that makes his music so like just monumental.
Yeah. So it's like I think it's what's called subjective experience, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what's there. What matters is what it does to
Mm-hmm.
your brain, right? How it affects you. That's that's like what happens when you're going through psychedelic experience and you get some input like this music.
Mm-hmm.
You it could do things to you, right? It could flip some switch that was
Mm-hmm.
not even intended, was not even thought about. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not a fan, but I respect Bob Dylan, right? So like he talks about that there are English teachers and their dissertations about his lyrics, what he meant and what it means and this and this. And he's like, I have no idea what it means. It felt good. I thought it. I put it on paper. It sounded right, and I recorded it. That's it. I had no ultimate motive or anything,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jacob is on a different level. He has ideas and he thinks like, oh, it's gonna do this, it's gonna affect it like this, it's gonna throw people off. Sometimes it's like trolling a little bit with his music, right? When
Yeah.
like with a new album, when there's like screaming suddenly, or
Yeah.
volume changes, or those harmony changes that sometimes it does like weird harmony. Everybody's like, oh, where's this
Mm-hmm.
going? And then he's
Right.
like, okay. So he like plays with you, right? So he does that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like you said, in the end, it's what it does to you. That's a whole
Yeah.
other thing, right?
And I think he's just being guided from such a different level, right? Like, and I think Bob Dylan, I'm not super familiar with him, although I know like he, like you said, he's very like studied and stuff. And, you know, they had college courses, I think, back in whatever days. But anyway, when he says that, he was like, oh, it just sounded good. I wrote it down. I don't know what it means. To me, that's a representation of like someone creating from spirit, right? Creating from that deep unconditional love. And then people sitting in the ego, sitting in fear that need to know what this is about, right? Because when you don't know, like we've been so conditioned that you need to constantly know, otherwise something could happen to you, right? So what you don't know about could hurt you. But the truth is, like, I know about a lot of things and they still could hurt me just as equally as if I didn't know about them. But we give ourselves like this false sense of control, honestly, in a really place that it, first of all, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter Bob Dylan's lyrics, other than someone found that as a projection, something to focus on instead of focusing on their internal. And I think that kind of brings us like back to the Tony Robbins too, is that's why it's so painful when you're doing personal development and you're riding so high on the success wheel, on the hamster wheel, and then you fall off the hamster wheel because you never actually looked at anything internally,
Yeah.
and you just built a bunch of distractions, a bunch of skills that helped you project it out, right? So skills of sales. I mean, today that's a whole, we could have a whole conversation a different day about that, about like the coaching industry and the helping industry and how the people making so much money, it's just because they're really good at marketing and really good at selling you, driving your hell in so bad that like literally you don't know a different way. And I was trained in that and I saw the back ends of it. And it's like, and I see friends now falling for it. And I say things. My son, my son the other day, he's in his early 20s and I'm really proud of him because he's like, starting to get to this place where he's entering personal development. And again, no shame on personal development, it gets people to a place. But it was because this guy had reached out to him on Instagram and was like, I'm going to give you this free master class. And I was like, Jaden, no. And so thank goodness he listened to his mom because he knows what his mom went through. And he's like, you're right, mom. All of a sudden he wants like tens of thousands of dollars. And I was like, I told you. But how, like my son was like, so like this guy's going to help me for free and blah, blah. And you get these people's hopes up. And then it's like, oh, give me your credit card. And that's what you said. That's what like he does. You get them into this emotional state of elation or an emotional state of like, I'm a worthless piece of crap without you.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that's where we live, right? That's acceptable. That's
Right.
normal. It's normal to rip people off and it's normal to upsell, right? What is
Yep.
upsell? It's, well, I don't need this. Well, let me tell you why you need this, right?
Right.
What is this? It's like I went to Vegas for a volleyball tournament with my daughter. The whole thing is designed, it's like a one big machine of squeezing money out of people. There's nothing else there, right? What else is there?
Right.
Art, Eh, food. You really don't need to go to Vegas to eat, right? And what is like, oh, food is so important that you need to like
Why?
gorge yourself. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that this is like normal, right? We accept this, yeah. And the ironic, here's the most ironic part. My job is I'm a consultant for car dealers. So I was in car sales. Now I consult them. I teach sales, right? So that's obviously I don't do that, right? I don't teach them like that. I don't teach them to rip people off. I try to be like I do like digital sales, so
Yeah.
transparency, openness, straightforward, right? But that's the world, right? And this is like the best thing I could find that allows me not to overwork myself and spend time with the family and do things for myself. But that's, that's where we
Right.
are.
Well, and I think there's such a difference too, right? Like you're really coming from this place of that unconditional love because you're doing your work. And so you're doing sales, which sales are a thing. Like there's always going to be sales, right? Like anytime I get into a conversation, they're like, oh, I want to hire you, even though I'm not driving in their pain or anything, that could still be considered a sale because we're talking about an exchange of money. But I do it from a place of love, in a place of this is what I have to offer, take it or leave it, right? And like you're showing up and teaching these guys the skills to help feed, or men and women, I just say guys, the skills to feed their families, to do things like that. And you're doing it in a manner that is loving. So, I mean, I think anything can be used for spirit or for ego, for love, or for fear. And so not to discount anything, it's just where are you coming from? What is your purpose? Is your purpose like screw the next guy over so that your family can fly first class next month? Yeah, that's getting into the ego.
Yeah, yeah. And look, one of the things I did learn from Tony Robbins, and I internalized it, is like when he talks about like, what's your question? Meaning like, what's your intention when you go into something,
Yes.
any activity, right? So if you go into sales activity, I ask those salespeople like, what's your intention? Well, sell a car. Okay. So if your intention is to sell a car, their intention will be to push you away and guard themselves because they can feel
Yes.
you want their money. But if your intention is, and your question is, how can I make this experience the best for them? And how can I make friends with these people? And you just say, forget about the sales. Okay.
Right.
If it happens and happens, we're just not going to worry about this. I'm going to worry about how to make this the best experience for them. Suddenly people open up. Suddenly things happen. Suddenly you really make meaningful connections.
I feel like you had to have trained my car salesman because it started out online because I was in Minnesota and he was in Florida. He's the best dang experience I ever had. Like, he picked me up from the airport, he put a bow on the car, like all these things. And his manager said to him, "Why are you doing this? You can send an Uber to pick her up." He's like, "I promised her." And he was just like the most amazing. He was young. You could tell he just kind of started and was just getting started out. But like, literally, I would like send anybody to him. I would always go to him if I need a car, because it just like, it was the experience. And to me, that's what people are seeking these days, is an experience anyway, not an actual item. I mean, that's why people buy Rolexes. That's why people buy, all these designer things, is because the experience that comes with it and the experience they get to have afterwards.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
owning it. Oh, so, but I think I love this, that the intention piece, because I think that's a big piece with Jacob. And I was listening to an interview someone recommended on my YouTube of Jacob, and it was when he talked about like the choir, the audience choir, how he came up with that. But one of the things he talked about as well is that he feels like his job is to, oh, there we go. We got the light off again. Like,
Once,
hey, we're here. Don't forget about us. Gotta love those.
yeah.
But but what he says is like, he feels like his job is to help people see their spark and remind them of their spark when they don't. And he used the reference of his sister. If she's going through like a hard time or whatever, he can see the spark within her, which is what I would say the light. But she can't. So it's his mission to say something to help remind her of the spark. So that's what he's doing. So to me, it's like, that's literally what I think his intention is always. Like you said, like doing unpredictable things in the music, because we get so caught in routine. You said earlier, like we play music in the background, like our whole life is narrated by music or television these days, right? Honestly, whether it's your own or the guy next to you. And so it's like he sparks you, right? He's
Yeah.
constantly looking to ignite the fire within all of us. And it's just such a beautiful, and then it just is received in so many different ways, because that's what we're all seeking, is a mirror of that spark. And he's just so bright and beautiful.
Yeah. And there was one interview, he really went deep. I'll have to find it again, but he talks about how this connection, that's like when he performs something, but then he sees how people react. So it bounces off that, because he has this level of perception that's like different level. And it's not just him playing, but he can see what it makes other people feel, right? It's like the best comedians.
Yeah.
They say a joke and they see how it works. So next time they know and they can
Right.
work off that, right? This level of perception.
Mm-hmm.
But for him, it's like it bounces back. The sound wave that he sends bounces back. He receives it, and then he can reprove it, and then it's just like this reverberation. It's just it's
a beautiful dance. And I think that's what he does in the audience choir, is like he turns everyone into an instrument, which then reminds us of the oneness, whether you're consciously thinking that or not. Like, your being that you truly are, which is love, is like, yes, this is what I've been trying to show you your entire life. And this guy's doing it with making you make these weird noises. But it's like he truly is doing that, what you said, the dance, like he's watching how people respond or don't respond, and he's like, we're seamlessly, and then he brings people in to do the same thing, and we don't know it, but we're all like in this like oneness, this machine working together.
yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it feels amazing. Oh, well, I mean, I could talk to you for hours. I feel like we have so much that like we could go off on psychedelics, we could go off on oneness, we could just have a million conversations. Um, but ultimately, do you have like any final things that you wanted to share about Jacob, or, your experience of him, or I don't care, anything.
Um, so about Jacob, just this one, that lyric that I sent you in a comment.
Oh, let me look.
This song. I'll find it. It's from Jesse Volume 2, and the song is Make Me Cry. And the lyric in the end, it ends, in every soul is the need to grow older to speed up the passing of time.
Mm.
I don't know why, but it makes me cry.
Mm.
So like, yeah, okay, he says his lyrics don't mean anything. Come on.
Mm.
There's like all the meaning is there. How does this not mean anything?
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. I
So
think
yeah.
it's like the meaning of everything and nothing all at once.
Yeah, but like she's right, right? We're all like, what is being bored? Being bored is, well, I want the time to pass by, right? And
Mm-hmm.
where is it? Where is the time passing by? It's closer to our death,
Mm-hmm.
closer to the end. How does it make sense? And I think you talk about this in one of your
Yeah,
videos, right?
I
Talk
do.
about the ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
That ego's trying to kill us.
Yep.
That's the
Always.
ego trying to kill us, trying to get us closer to our
Mm-hmm.
death, which makes no sense. That's why, and somebody with this level of perception, it just makes him cry.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, I mean, thank you to anyone and everyone for tuning in, whoever found our amazing conversation. I'm hoping this isn't our last conversation. I feel like we could
I'll be
share,
happy to talk to you again. I loved
yeah,
it.
share
Thank you.
so much more on YouTube. Um, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you anyone for tuning in.